What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9 with another video of Star Wars Unlimited TCG. This time I'm going to be playing Boba Fett. And I am playing here with a Boba Fett command deck versus a Tarkin aggression. So Boba, when an enemy unit leaves play, you may exhaust him to gain a resource. My opponent leads off with a Death Star Stormtrooper, 1 cost, 3/1. Grand Moff Tarkin's ability allows you to spend 1 and exhaust to give an experience token to an Imperial unit. So leading off with this trooper, putting a 3/1 body on the board. And I'm thinking about what to do here. I end up deciding to play Colonel Yularen. So Yularen is a 2 cost, 2/3 Imperial official. When you play a command unit, including this one, heal 1 damage from your base. In this case, I am thinking that I can use this to trade with the Stormtrooper if he gives it experience. He indeed gives it experience, now making that trooper a 4/2. And so now I can trade with Yularen to prevent him from getting big value out of the experienced trooper. I have the initiative, so he's not going to be able to give another experience to get out of range. But I actually see an even better play available because I draw a Super Laser Technician. So I'm going to use my Energy Conversion Lab, which allows me to, once per game, give a unit ambush, to ambush his trooper with the Super Laser Technician. So that's going to take it out. The Super Laser Technician becomes a resource. And I would actually get a resource back with Boba, but I forget. My opponent plays a Super Laser Technician of his own, and I'm then going to play a TIE LN. Opponent takes the initiative, and I'm going to swing in with Colonel Yularen, which is actually a bit of a misplay here. What I should have done is used Yularen to clear his Super Laser Technician. He's already taken the initiative, so he wouldn't get any further value out of it. And this turn, he's going to be able to use Tarkin's ability to give it an experience, and then it would trade with Yularen instead of Yularen killing him and remaining alive. So, bit of a mistake there on my part, I believe. I think that I should have. Taken the kill there instead of pushing damage to the base. This situation has become less favorable to me as a result of not going in there earlier. So a little unfortunate, but we'll see what we can do. I play the Homestead Militia, 3 cost, 3/4. While you control 6 or more resources, this unit gains Sentinel. I do not, of course, have 6 or more resources at this time, but it's still going to be a 3/4 body here. My opponent is going to play a copy of Resupply, which becomes a resource. And now up to 5 resources, even without the Super Laser Technician having died. So he's going to be able to bring in Tarkin this turn. And so then we are looking, I end up taking the trade here so that he doesn't have a chance to bring out Tarkin and use the Tarkin's on attack ability to get more resources. This also gives me a resource from Boba's ability before he deploys. that means I have 3 resources floating, which I'm going to be able to use to bring out that Consortium Star Viper. In addition, I am going to be able to play Boba himself this turn. Consortium Star Viper, 3 cost, 3/3. While you have the initiative, this unit gains Restore 2. My opponent swings in with Tarkin, inflicting 2. Doesn't have a unit to give an experience token to, though. I bring in Boba. He passes the TIE LN here, coming in for 2 damage. Then we're going to have Boba swinging in to damage Tarkin. I want to set that up to get him out of there. I want to remove him before he has the chance to give experience to a bunch of his guys. Okay, so then we're going to resource cards. My opponent's been ramping heavily and is now up to 7 resources while I'm only at 6, even with having ramped myself. Opponent leads off with a Force Choke against Boba, dealing 5. So Force Choke is an event. If you control a Force unit, costs 1 less, deal 5 damage to a non-vehicle unit, and that unit's controller draws a card. So the Force Choke actually kills Boba. But it does draw me a card. So a little unfortunate. I would have preferred Boba stay alive here, but these things happen sometimes. And I decide I'm gonna go ahead and just take the kill there. My Homestead Militia able to kill Tarkin. Now there's not going to be a chance of him, so there's a chance, you could say that I could have developed my board or done something else or attacked his base, because the militia would still be there to kill Tarkin when the time came. But there's a chance that he would play like a TIE Advanced and buff Tarkin, or an IRG or an Emperor's Royal Guard, and then I couldn't attack it. He indeed plays an Emperor's Royal Guard. But I have a good counter here with Bosk. So Emperor's Royal Guard is a 3 cost, 3/4 that has Sentinel while you control an official. And if you control the Emperor Palpatine as either a leader or a unit, it gets plus 1 HP. In this situation, though, I'm going to be able to play Bosk. Bosk will ambush the Emperor's Royal Guard. So Bosk is really strong. 5 cost, 4/5 with ambush. And when you play an event, you may deal 2 damage to a unit. So not only do I defeat that unit while keeping myself on board, I also have this strong, when you play an event effect, I then send my other units in for 5 damage. My opponent has taken the initiative. And I feel like I'm in a pretty good position. My opponent is ramped higher than me, which is not great, but I'm in a spot where I have a lot of damage just on the board. I have a Sentinel in the ground arena, so if he does have an ambush unit like Agent Callus, he's not actually going to be able to clear my copy of Bosk with it. Bosk means that any events that I play are going to be extra threatening. I can play more units this turn. I have a pretty good position, and we're even on cards in hand, or in fact, he keeps resourcing, so I have an advantage on cards in hand. Now, my opponent spends 6 resources for an ATST. This is actually going to be something that might be a problem in other circumstances, but I have a pretty direct counter. So Bosk is strength 4. I can play an Overwhelming Barrage, which will give Bosk +2/+2, up to 6, and then deal damage equal to his power to an enemy unit. So that would be 6 damage to the ATST, but then also when you play an event, you may deal 2 damage to a unit. So I use that also on the ATST for 8 total damage, clearing it out. My opponent spends 2 resources to just play a 1st Legion Snowtrooper. Bosk is now really buffed. I do also get a resource back with Boba Fett, which is going to allow me to play that copy of Colonel Yularen. And so I'm now in a position where I can do a bunch of damage. The buffed Bosk hits the enemy base for 6 because he still has the stat bonus from the Overwhelming Barrage. My opponent takes the initiative. The Homestead Militia scores a hit, as do these other units, bringing my opponent down to just 7 life, and I play Colonel Yularen and repair 1 damage from my own base. So overall, I am in a pretty good position here. Arguably, it might have been good to trade the Homestead Militia for the Trooper there in case he has an Overwhelming Barrage, but that's not what I opted to do. Instead, I'm just sort of pushing damage to the base, and my opponent's base is getting very low, so I am in what I think is a pretty good spot. I also have a Surprise Strike in hand, which is going to allow me to maybe do some bonus damage to the base if need be. My opponent indeed has an Overwhelming Barrage, but on a 2-cost unit, it's only going to be 4 total damage. That does mean that he gets to take out both Bosk and the Homestead Militia, because each of them has 2 life remaining. So high value Barrage for sure. Overwhelming Barrage is one of the best cards in the game right now. I'm not sure what I would say the overall best card in the game is, but Overwhelming Barrage is high up there. It's very, very strong. So my opponent gets to take out those 2 units with this card, even off a relatively weak unit. But then I'm going to have Colonel Yularen hit the enemy base for 2, and at this point the game is basically over. My opponent has the Snowtrooper can take out Yularen, but then I can surprise strike my Star Viper in to get the kill. And I think my opponent actually conceded after Yularen attacked his base because he realized, yep, I'm not going to be able to save myself from getting taken out by the space arena. Okay, so that was a pretty quick game. We're going to go into round 2 here. That was once again a Boba Fett Command versus Tarkin Aggression deck. I do note also that my opponent is running the generic base. I think this may be because his deck has some very late game plays in it, and he's trying to preserve life total to try to get to the end game. I don't know for sure. I personally prefer Tarkin Town. I think the abilities on those bases are often going to be higher value than just having the extra life, but I could be wrong, and I do note that my opponent has some real end game stuff, so maybe he's trying to save stuff up for that. That hand, I don't really like it. I'm going to go for the mulligan. I have 2 copies of Colonel Yularen, which are my only initial plays, and then I have 2 surprise strikes and 2 expensive units. I would prefer to have something that has more of a mid-game. This hand is not optimal either, but I'm going to resource my extra shoot first and my extra Bosk. I end up playing a TIE Fighter, TIE Land Fighter. Cool art on that card. 1 cost 2/1 vanilla. My opponent does the same thing. I take the initiative. My opponent then buffs his TIE Fighter using Tarkin's ability. Okay. So I have a decent play here. So I'm thinking about what to resource. I end up deciding that I'm going to resource this Waylay, I think. So Waylay is good against really big units, and it's good against super laser technicians, but otherwise it's kind of a questionable card. I end up deciding I want to deploy my Shore Trooper this turn, so I'm going to shoot first to have my TIE Fighter clear my opponent's TIE Fighter. Attack with unit gets +1/+0 for this attack and deals combat damage before the defender. And sadly, my opponent does play a super laser technician. So if I had kept that Waylay, I could have gotten a resource back with Boba and then used the Waylay to return the super laser technician to hand, which would prevent him from ramping up this turn. And what I think have been a significantly better play than what I did playing out the Shore Trooper, because my opponent's now going to be able to give experience to his super laser technician and trade with my Shore Trooper. This is sort of the scenario that I was discussing. Also, my hand this turn is very weak. I have nothing to play. I can play a surprise strike for bonus damage, but I would rather save it for a more impactful moment. My opponent trades his now experienced Super Laser Technician with my Shore Trooper after the Shore Trooper hits the base for 2. I then swing in with a basic TIE LN for another 2 damage to the base. My opponent actually plays a resupply, ramping very aggressively. I take the initiative, and I believe he brings out Tarkin and hits my base for 2. Yep, that's right. On the plus side, he didn't have a unit to buff with Tarkin. I'm happy that it was that resupply and not like an Emperor's Royal Guard that he would then give bonus stats. This turn, my plan is to bring out Boba and then use some combination of Boba, one of the bounty hunters in my hand, and surprise strike to try and take down Tarkin. So I bring out Boba. My opponent immediately uses a forced choke on Boba, inflicting 5 damage, and I do draw a card from that. I draw a Waylay, and so my plan is I'm going to have Boba hit Tarkin this turn, and then I'm going to play one of these cards to. So Boba hits Tarkin. Boba is himself defeated, and while Tarkin stays on the field, but Tarkin is now in position to be taken out by Agent Kallus, which will get me a card draw and leave Kallus on the board. So Kallus hits the field, takes down Tarkin with his ambush, and when another unique unit is defeated, you may draw a card. Use this ability only once per round, so I then draw a card. Overall, pretty high value. My opponent takes the initiative, and my TIE continues strafing his base for another 2 damage. Okay, so right now, we're seeing how things continue. My opponent does have a seasoned Shore Trooper, and it is over that 6 resource threshold. So the seasoned Shore Trooper is now a 4/2 instead of just a 2/2, and my opponent trades with Kallus. I swing in the TIE for another 2 damage. My opponent plays a Gladiator Star Destroyer, giving itself Sentinel. I have a pretty good counter there here with a Waylay. So I'm going to play, first I play the Homestead Militia, because this way my opponent is likely to buff the Gladiator, which he does. And then I'm going to Waylay it, which will negate the buff. And so now if he has a 2-cost unit in hand, he won't be able to play it, though there's, of course, some chance that he would play it anyway, or that he would have a 1-cost unit that he could still play. So overall, I end this turn with units in both ground and space. I'm going to resource this Super Laser Technician, which isn't very high value at this point. And I'm feeling pretty decent about this situation. My opponent has a huge number of resources, though. I think he's ramped up to 9 resources, and is actually going to use all 9 to play Relentless, one of the scariest cards in the game. 9 cost 8/8. The first event played by each opponent each round loses all abilities. That is very scary. I'm going to have to put together some kind of combination of multiple cards in order to kill that thing, as it is not really something that you can clear with very normal circumstance. I do have a Fett's Fire Spray. I have Bosk. I believe Bosk's ability works even if your event loses its abilities. So if I play Bosk, I can then use I can use one event, have Bosk deal 2 damage to it, and then play another event, have Bosk also deal 2 damage to it, and then maybe it'll be that surprise strike to have the TIE go in and kill it, or that maximum firepower to kill it directly. So I do have some options for clearing the opponent's Relentless. Right now I just hit the base for 2, going to hit the base for another 3 using my Homestead Militia, and then I am going to, so one other thing that I could do is I could bring out Fett's Fire Spray and swing into that thing, or swing into the enemy base. Fett's Fire Spray is probably going to be difficult to clear, but I end up deciding I'm going to bring out Bosk, and now I potentially have access to some kind of complicated play with multiple events in order to clear out Relentless. Okay, so then my opponent draws up. I have an Admiral Piet. So Admiral Piet, actually, I'm going to remove from this deck. I don't know why he's in here. I don't think he's very strong in this build. I don't have very many big units, and I have. I guess he does give me another turn 1 play. So there is that, and maybe there's not going to be a better option there. But I'm not really thrilled by him in this build. So I may well change that, but. For the time being, my opponent hits my base with the Relentless, which I don't like to see. And I'm going to attack Bosk into his base. And then I have this plan to do a big combination, but he plays an Overwhelming Barrage. And so he actually gets to do 10 damage, which is just enough to wipe my board completely. So pretty brutal situation. And so now I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can push through, I can play Fett's Fire Spray this turn. You know, I could play Fet's Fire Spray this turn and then attack the base and do some more damage and maybe try to just sneak enough damage through to win the game, even though this is looking like a very dubious situation for me now. You know, Fet's Fire Spray is a tough unit. Maybe Relentless will have to attack it to clear it, and that'll buy me some more time to develop other things. So I bring out Fet's Fire Spray, and my opponent responds with another Overwhelming Barrage and kills it. So very negative development this turn. I went from being in what seemed like a pretty good position with a single tough unit that I had to deal with, but overall better board, to having my board completely wiped. Overwhelming Barrage is a really strong card, and when you play it on a really strong unit like that Relentless, it gets even better. So I'm now looking at my cards in hand. It's a tough situation. I really want to try. So ideally, I could use Change of Heart to gain control of Relentless and use that to somehow attack my side. So my opponent's discussing why he did why he played those barrages after attacking. So he was worried that Change of Heart would take control and make it attack him. But I'm pointing out that he wasn't sure whether Change of Heart allowed you to attack with ready the unit, and it actually does not. So if he attacked earlier with it, it indeed made it so that I couldn't use Change of Heart on that. My opponent resourcing even more. I'm resourcing even more just because I have a huge hand here, but my options for dealing with this Relentless are comparatively limited. My plan is to bring out Bosk, and maybe I can do some combination of multiple events in the future. You know, I can play Bosk and Boba Fett this turn, and that gives me some decent presence on the ground. But I think it's over, because if my opponent just attacks my base with Relentless and then takes initiative, he can clear me with Relentless on the next turn. Even if I had the initiative, I can't use events against Relentless because it blocks them, so I would have to spend at least 2 actions to get some event to counter it, and therefore he's just going to kill me. I could try and combo into a Waylay, but the problem is that he can just replay it then with all his resources. My opponent brings out an AT-ST, which I don't like seeing. I'm going to bring out Boba Fett. So I now have some presence on the ground at least. But it's still an unfavorable scenario, and my opponent plays another Overwhelming Barrage, the third of the game, wipes my board again, and I'm just conceding there. It's basically over. He will beat me on the next turn. I think that I had already basically lost that turn, but the Overwhelming Barrage makes it official. So tough situation there. Huge value from the Overwhelming Barrages and Relentless as kind of a premier endgame unit. I know some people aren't fond of Relentless. I actually think it's one of the best units in the game when you get to its phase, because the ability to negate the first event that your opponent plays each turn often means that the counters your opponent could use against other big units are just invalid against Relentless, or require more setup, or can otherwise be played around. And as a result of that dynamic, it is much harder to deal with than other big units. You know, if my opponent had played one of those AT-ATs, I could have just used Waylay on it and kept pushing him on the ground. But I can't do that with Relentless unless I play another unit to use up the absorption effect first. Okay, so we're going into the next round, and my opponent plays a Death Star Stormtrooper. I play Colonel Yularen, similar opening to earlier. I take the initiative. This time I don't have the Super Laser Technician follow-up, so I am going to just take the trade, which precludes my opponent from putting another experience on that Stormtrooper and taking him out of range. So trade taken there, overall even situation. My opponent plays a Seasoned Shore Trooper. Really cool art on that card. One of the newest cards to be previewed. 2 cost 2/3, and if you have 3 or more resources, it gets +2. I play Boba Fett. 3 cost 3/5. If this unit is attacking an exhausted unit that didn't interplay this turn, it deals bonus damage on attack. So Boba Fett deals 3 bonus damage to the defender on attack if it's an exhausted unit that didn't interplay. One really relevant part of that is that leaders did not interplay on the turn they deployed. They were already in play just as a leader. So Boba Fett will always be able to deal 6 damage to an exhausted leader on his attack, which actually kills some leaders like Leia, Sabine Wren, IG-88 in one go. Which makes him quite threatening there. Also, he's a 3 cost 3/5, which is above curve stats, so just overall very efficient. I play a TIE fighter. My opponent has buffed his seasoned shore trooper with Tarkin, and then sends him in with a snow trooper lieutenant to kill Boba, leaving him on 1 life. My opponent then plays another seasoned shore trooper, so ground arena is not looking great for me. I have a Homestead Militia, but it doesn't actually have Sentinel yet. However, I have an Overwhelming Barrage in hand, which is going to enable that Homestead Militia to get some big results. Thinking about what to resource here. So there's an argument that I should... So Overwhelming Barrage, I have 2 Overwhelming Barrages, a Bosk and a Star Viper. So Overwhelming Barrage is the best card there. I do have 2 of them. There's an argument that what I should actually do is resource the second Overwhelming Barrage for redundancy. The other thing that I could try to do is keep one of the Overwhelming Barrages and the Star Viper, and then play Overwhelming Barrage, use Boba's ability to resource back, deploy Boba, hopefully attack and get 2 more resources back, and play the Star Viper this turn. But the Star Viper is not that great a unit, and I decided I would rather keep the other Overwhelming Barrage in hand as well as Bosk. So I play an Overwhelming Barrage there on the Homestead Militia, and I use it to kill both of the Shore Troopers and deal 1 damage to the Snow Trooper there. Big results, and I use Boba's ability to get a resource back. My opponent force chokes my Homestead Militia for 5 damage. That does give me a card draw. And I see an Admiral Piet. Not the best card, but still something that I can potentially bring out. And let's see here. I end up deploying Boba Fett. My Overwhelming Barrage is keeping the Homestead Militia alive even through that 5 damage, so they are now a 5... what is it? They're a 5... they're a 5/6 with 5 damage on them. So if my opponent brings out Tarkin, the Homestead Militia will be able to hit him for 5. He ends up just taking the initiative and not bringing out Tarkin this turn. I ready 2 resources after attacking with Boba, which will allow me to play Piet. When this unit completes an attack, if an enemy unit left play this phase, ready up to 2 resources. I then hit the base for 5 with the Homestead Militia before they are defeated, and I bring out Admiral Piet to just sort of short my force there. I think I might actually cut the copies of Admiral Piet and bring in like legitimately the Viper Probe Droid or something, just because I don't really have anything for him to use his ability on. I'm not running the Emperor's Royal Guard for the official synergy. 2 cost 1/4 is a good stat line sometimes. Like it's quite favorable against a Death Star Stormtrooper on the first turn, for instance. But I think I would rather have something that's a little more aggressive and a little more utility. Piet's a good card, but not really in this build. Anyway, my opponent leads off the next turn by playing a TIE Interceptor, 4 cost 3/2, and it deals 3 damage to a space unit when it comes into play. It may deal 3 damage to a space unit, so he destroys my TIE LN there. I then hit the base with Piet for 1. My opponent has another one of those troopers on the field, the Seasoned Shore Trooper, getting some solid results here as a 2 cost 4/3. I have the option, so Boba can kill his Shore Trooper. My opponent doesn't have resources left. Boba can kill the Shore Trooper. I could use an Overwhelming Barrage here, which would kill both the Shore Trooper and the TIE Interceptor, but I think I decided I would rather bring out more units here. I can potentially play both Boba and Bosk this turn if I get Boba's ability to get me some resources. So Bosk comes in and takes down the Seasoned Shore Trooper. And then Boba Fett hits the enemy base and readies resources, which I then use to play Boba Fett the unit. My opponent once again decided not to bring out Tarkin this turn. He could have brought out Tarkin and killed Bosk and given an experience token to the TIE Interceptor, but Tarkin would himself then be quickly defeated. I think he's trying to wait for an opportunity where I don't have such a dominant presence in the ground arena. My opponent leads off this turn with a Forced Choke, defeating Boba Fett and giving me a card. Bizarrely, my hand is all events. But a handful of events with Bosk in play to deal damage based on playing events is not exactly garbage. I decide right now, so I have the Overwhelming Barrage. One thing I could do is play Shoot First and use the damage from Bosk to kill the TIE Interceptor. I think there's a good chance he's going to be playing more stuff though this turn, so I decide I'm going to hit his base with Boba and I'm going to see what he does. He brings out Tarkin, and I have Bosk shoot first on Tarkin and use his ability to deal 2 damage. So 2 damage to Tarkin from the ability, and then shoot first lets me attack at +1 and deal combat damage before the defender. So I deal 7 damage to him, and he doesn't even get to hit back. Tarkin defeated by Bosk very handily there. My opponent brings out a TIE Advanced and buffs his TIE Interceptor, giving it +2/+2 with those 2 experience tokens. But I can now, so I could play the Overwhelming Barrage and just kill both of them. But if I play the Waylay, send the Interceptor back to hand, and use Bosk's ability then to kill the TIE Advanced, that way I get to keep the Overwhelming Barrage in my hand for later. The TIE Interceptor sent back to hand isn't going to do a lot, and Bosk still kills the Advanced, so I've wiped the enemy board, and I have my Bounty Hunters in position to do a bunch of damage next turn overall, and I still have the Overwhelming Barrage for later in the game in case my opponent brings out something strong. Overall, I'm feeling quite good about this situation. My base is still full. My opponent's low life. He only has 2 cards in hand. One of them is that Interceptor, which is going to be low value, and my opponent shows that the other card was Relentless, which he isn't going to get a chance to play until next turn. The Interceptor would be low value, and he just concedes. So a victory for Boba Fett over Tarkin here ended up going 2-1, and my opponent shows that he had General Taggy, or Tag, or however you pronounce it, 2-cost 2/2 when played, give an experience token to each of up to 3 trooper units, but it's just so hard to find an opportunity to play this guy and get big value. I know that some people were excited about this card. I genuinely think he's quite poor. Even when my opponent had 3 troopers in play at a time, you know, my Overwhelming Barrage ended up taking down 2 of them, and even in what looked like it might have been an ideal situation for Tag, he ended up just not being able to get much value. So overall, a interesting set of games there. I want to give a shout out actually here. I want to give a shout out to my opponent from the previous game. So this is kind of funny, but in the previous games that I showed here, I had some games in my last video where I believe I was playing Leia, and my opponent ZuhairGalaxy was playing Vader. And I want to give a shout out to ZuhairGalaxy. This Boba Fett command deck was based on a deck that he was playing earlier in some games that I didn't upload. So I just want to give him credit for that, as it was inspired by his build, though I think ours ended up being a bit different. Anyway, that's gonna do it for this video, guys. Thanks to y'all for watching, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I'll catch you guys later.